Bears podcast with Brad, Jim, and Will. What have they been watching lately? They're husky, hairy, huggable homos. Movie Bears podcast.
Hello all and welcome to the Movie Bears podcast. I'm Brad Harris, and along with my fellow husky, hairy, huggable homos and friends, we review films, current and classic on this show, all of course with a lovable bear twist. We are excited to be with you this week to talk about not one, but two films. We're going to be reviewing Transformers 1, the new CGI animated outing that is a kind of a prequel to a lot of the other Transformer movies and stories out there. How they're connected or not, who the fuck knows? But as its own thing, we're going to be talking it through and talking a little bit about maybe some potential connections. We're also going to be reviewing The Wild Robot. That's going to be a good discussion. I can't wait to get into it. But, you know, basically, it's a robot show today. It's all about the bots. Yeah. And, you know, we're jonesing to talk about these metal marvels, if you will. To help us do that, though, let me introduce you to my co-host. Jim Pugliafico is with us here on the show this week. How you doing, sweetheart?
I'm doing great. I'm ready to get into the robot talk. You know, this is an all mecha show today.
Indeed. Well, glad you're here for it, babe. We've also got William Lindis here with us as well. Will, how are you?
I'm great. Fresh off the heels of Fantastic Fest. I've just spent a week and a half in movie theaters just watching every genre movie that's coming out in the next several months. So I'm at a high right now. I'm so excited to be here talking movies, including one that I saw at the festival. So this is going to be a fun battle of the bots. I'm really excited to see kind of how these two stack up against each other. I'm really interested in seeing how each of you feels about these two movies. If one is the definitive winner, if both of them are good, both of them are bad. There's a lot of ways this one could go. And I don't know where y'all landed. So this will be fun.
All right. Well, I know a little bit about Jim's feelings, but as usual, we tend to withhold a lot from each other when we know we're going to be talking about a movie on the show. And
just like any great marriage, we just withhold a lot from each other.
We withhold each other. Yeah.
Bury your secrets.
And of course, Will, with you doing the Fantastic Fest thing, we haven't had a lot of time to catch up. So really, really stoked to get in and hear y'all's thoughts on these films. I see we've got a few folks hanging out with us live. Welcome to you as well. Feel free to jump in that live chat. Say hello. Tell us what you thought about these films. If you saw them, if you're on the fence, feel free to comment as to why. And if you are finding us through YouTube or Apple Podcasts, Spotify, etc., days, weeks, months, even years after this the special recording window we're enjoying right now, we still want to hear from you, even if it's 8 years from now. What did you think of these movies? Hop into the comment section on Facebook or Twitter, wherever you like to engage with us. Let us know. But let's get our base warnings out of the way up front. We're going to be talking about both Transformers 1 and The Wild Robot, completely spoiler-free for about the first 10 minutes of each discussion segment. So we're going to give you a brief introduction to what the movie is, what it's about in a non-spoilerly way. Then we'll give you fair warning before we open spoilers up. So do what you got to do to protect yourself. If you're listening live, you know, mute us during spoiler time and then come back for the next review, or just use the time index in the show notes. If you're listening post-recording, bounce around as needed. All of that said, heavy lifting done and out of the way. Jim, Will, are you ready to get into our first movie discussion of the week?
Let's roll out.
Transform and roll out.
Yeah.
It's pretty good. It's no Peter Cullen, but I mean, who could be, right? All right, here we go. Our review of Transformers 1. All right, Jim, why don't you kick this one off for us, if you don't mind? What the heck is Transformers 1? And non-spoilery, of course, what were your initial thoughts on this one?
Yeah, so what we have in Transformers 1 is really an animated, what I think is a reboot of the franchise. Basically, it's an origin story, or at least that's what the supposedly non-spoilery synopsis is that I'll read to you from IMDb. And here we go. The untold origin story of Optimus Prime and Megatron, better known as sworn enemies, but who were once friends, bonded like brothers, who changed the fate of Cybertron forever. This one has, as both movies do that we're going to talk about today, has a really fantastic voice cast. We have a ton of well-known names in here. We have Lawrence Fishburne, Steve Buscemi, John Hamm, Brian Tyree Henry, Chris Hemsworth, Scarlett Johansson, Vanessa Ligori. I mean, it's a packed cast, and we did not know the cast, the voice cast members going into the film. I think we might have known Chris Hemsworth, but so we had a lot of fun trying to pick out, as we always do in these animated films, trying to pick out the voices. And we'll talk about that for both movies too. But yeah, so this is a Transformers movie, and for those who kind of know me, I didn't really grow up steeped in the lore of Transformers and Cybertron and all the stuff. Certainly not like some of you did, and I know Brad. So I'm going to lean on you guys kind of heavily when I make mistakes about which characters have which names and so forth. So I had no expectations going into this one. We saw 2 trailers basically before the movie. The first one didn't really do a lot for me. If I remember the order, I think it was the first one that didn't do much for me, and it was the second one that really kind of grabbed me and said, maybe this movie is something way different than what I think it's going to be. And you know how trailers can be a little misleading, right? So I went in really with no big expectations, mainly because A, not being a huge fan, and B, kind of not knowing what to expect. And I really enjoyed this film way more than I thought I would. And I think I know why. This is an action. This is an action movie, animated. I mean, produced by Michael Bay, right? Is that correct? I think it was produced by Michael Bay, because he probably holds he's done a couple of the older Transformers movies, right? So he probably holds rights or whatever, copyrights to the franchise at this point. But so it is an action movie. But I'll tell you what I liked about this movie this was so much a non-Michael Bay movie, in that the characters in this movie are what drive the film, in my view. They did a great job of describing the world, setting up characters, getting us emotionally connected to these characters, such that when the story played out, we were fully hooked. And I credit this movie a lot for that. I think this movie kind of walks the line between being a good movie for like first timers or maybe kids who are just getting into Transformers, and longtime fans. Because as the synopsis says, it says that this was the untold origin story. I'm not sure that's really true. I'd have to defer to you guys, but I'm pretty sure this origin story has been told before. Maybe not shown before, but it's definitely been told before in some of these franchises, or at least referred to. So yeah, I think this is a slam dunk. I think for those of you kind of on the fence, I think you should take a chance at this movie, because I think it's going to surprise you how great it is. I had a really fun time with this one.
Wow, to hear you gush about a Transformers
I
film.
know, right? I can't
Whew.
tell you, like in some of the previous movies, how I felt bludgeoned to death by like the action, like the clang, clang, like, and I would sit there and it would just kind of wash over me and kind of wash over me as a jumble, and I would be like totally non-interested. This one, the characterizations were great. The story I thought was really good. It really brought across some emotional beats that really worked, I thought, especially for a cartoony, quote unquote, film about animated robots.
All right. Well, thank you so much for sharing your high praise with us. We're going to kick things over to Will. And Will, I'm curious, where did you come down on this one?
Yeah, so one of the things that sometimes we always talk about when we're kind of behind the scenes of the show is what type of movies we're going to be reviewing for the podcast, right? That's one of the things where it's like, are we going to talk about the bigger release of the week, the passion project that we're interested in, the thing that's kind of going through the middle, and there's always different ways to do all that, right? And one of the things that often comes up is like, oh gosh, there's going to be a Transformers movie coming up. We're probably going to review that for the show. And, it's never been a fun experience. It's always a fun experience to talk about it, but it's never a fun experience for me to watch those movies, right? Like they've just been kind of across the board, maybe except for Bumblebee to a degree, but like, they've just not been historically like my cup of tea. So I'm really happy to say that this one was pretty damn good, and is much more in alignment with like what I hope this franchise does from here. Jim hit the nail on the head. This is the first time where I really felt like the characters were given the attention they needed. It wasn't just about spectacle, although there's a lot of cool spectacle in this movie. It's character-driven spectacle. The spectacle happens because the characters have things that they want to accomplish. They have motivations. They have reasons to conflict with one another. They have wants. They have grudges, and all of those things wedge and grind against each other into something that is super compelling. Animation here is pretty darn good. There's maybe a little bit where it feels a little overly like kind of, I don't know, like sheen or glossy to me, which I know part of it is their robots, but beyond that, some of the backgrounds felt a little slick for my tastes, but like whatever, it's a good looking movie overall. Voice acting super carries this. The big two leads here are almost unrecognizable in a good way. Chris Hemsworth and Brian Tyree Henry playing our two leads here. Orion and D16, who will eventually become Optimus and Megatron. That's the hook of the movie. And this movie really lives or dies on their ability to come across as compelling friends who have just different enough worldviews that you can see the places where they unite and the places where they might drift apart. And I think they do that really compellingly. Across the board, the voice acting was really good, though. I wasn't sure how much I was going to be interested in seeing Keegan-Michael Key play Bumblebee and kind of as the comic relief here.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually thought it was pretty fun. Across the board, really good here. This was good. This was good. To answer your question about like, has this ever been told before? There is a long line of Transformers comic books that have done all of these things in different ways. Like there was a comic book series. There's been animated series on different channels, not just the old one from the 80s, but there's been a lot of different spin-offs, and a lot of them have kind of taken their stab at, the background of Optimus. And they've used this whole Orion Pax thing before. And, sometimes he's a law clerk or minor, whatever it happens to be. The nice thing about this, though, is that regardless of where those things live and where those things don't, and I don't have a lot of information on them because Transformers is one that I watched as a kid, but I don't know that I had like a deep investment in the lore the way I did with like, I don't know, other cartoons of the same era, I enjoyed them. I had the little transforming toys, but I didn't really, I wasn't really involved in, who Optimus was besides like the cool transforming, fire when I was like 5, whatever.
Yeah.
But I feel like this is a good jumping off point for them to do whatever at this point. they could expand this animated world and keep telling these movies forward and sort of disregard the big, live action movies of the past. They can use these to bridge into them. There's a lot of different ways they can go here, but whatever they do, I'm excited for, I feel like, really the first time in Transformers in a while, which is a weird thing to say as a 42-year-old, I guess. But here I am, right? I like this a lot. I think most people like it a lot, especially if you've sort of written off this franchise. I do encourage you to give this one a go. It's surprising how surprised I was by it.
Yeah, I mean,
All
it seems like we've had a shit ton of Transformers, movies and shows and stuff, and to me, this one kind of stands above them. But I people may have differing opinions on that. But Brad, what did you think?
Yeah, Will, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us as well. I think, like the two of you, I enjoyed this way more than I maybe thought I was going to. Jim, you called out the trailers, and I'll tell you what, when we saw that first trailer, which really painted this film as like a straight up like kid comedy, I turned to Jim, Will, and I was just like, ugh. I did
He was
not
mad.
want to see it. I was like, oh fuck, really? But then when that second trailer came out, there was still some of the comedy elements, but there was kind of like a dark and grittiness that started to shine through, where I was like, okay, maybe there's a little more to this. Plus, marketing is so dumb sometimes. I mean, I get it; they're trying to get kids to come see these films with their parents, but when we saw this movie, yeah, there's like, I don't know, 8 or 9 comedic bits in the film, but by and large, I mean, this is a character drama, and it's a really damn good character drama. Seeing Orion Pax and D16 like going through their arc. I mean, it's in the trailer, so we know that they're kind of on the way to become Optimus and Megatron, but it's the journey to get there, right? That is so fascinating. And kind of seeing them, it kind of reminded me, I know I talk about Smallville a lot on this show, but it reminded me of like the early seasons of Smallville. Spoilers for a 20-year-old show, I guess, where like Clark Kent and Lex Luthor were like friends, but they had different worldviews, right? And so they were both taking actions that were good actions, but like their motivations were different, and inevitably it ended up bringing them sort of head to head. And that's kind of what happens here, right? Just some disagreements over some things, and craziness ensues. But I have to give a giant shout out to Chris Hemsworth. Like Jim said, I didn't look at the voice cast going in, because we like to guess who's who. So I at first I had no like, inkling, and then they fucking ruin it, because who comes on screen right up front before the movie shows? Hi, I'm Chris Hemsworth, the voice of Optimus Prime. And I'm like, why did you do that? But then the movie started, and I'm like, wait, this is really Chris Hemsworth? Like,
doesn't sound like Thor, does it?
I'm like, does he come in and voice him later in the movie or something? Does the voice actor change? No, it's Chris Hemsworth doing a totally different voice, and it worked for me. It worked for me a lot, and we'll talk more, in spoilers about character arcs and growth. But I ended up maybe thinking Chris Hemsworth is one of the best portrayals of Optimus I've ever seen, which is pretty incredible. And fucking Brian Tyree Henry is D16 and Megatron. Dude, he was incredible. I really hope that this movie gets the sequel that's being planned. I was reading this is actually supposed to be a trilogy of films. The other two haven't been necessarily greenlit yet. This has only made like, I don't know, $76 million or something so far, and it's been out for a couple weeks. So I don't know if that bodes well, in terms of sequel money, but even if we don't get a sequel, even if I look at this as just a one-shot standalone thing, I feel like this informs so much Transformers stuff that has come before. Not just the Michael Bay movies, but even thinking about like the 80s cartoon series, Transformers G1, thinking about the animated movie from 86, Transformers Prime that came out in the mid 2000s. Like, I think this sets the stage for all of it. And I actually want to go back and like rewatch everything except the Michael Bay movies. Well, except Bumblebee. Bumblebee.
You
was
didn't like
really good.
Bumblebee, right? Or
I
did-
loved Bumblebee.
Oh, okay. All right. All right.
Bumblebee was great. It was the only
I
one
know
where they
that-
look. Yeah.
I know that it's highly regarded. I just didn't remember
Yeah.
if you liked it or not.
I loved it. It was fantastic. Anyway, this movie I think joins the pantheon of good Transformers films. They are few, but they do exist, and I can't wait to see what happens with this. I hope that we get more.
Jim, I'm going to also flex my memory on this one and recall that Bumblebee made Brad's top 10 for the year that it came out.
Good memory.
Okay.
Mhm.
Good memory.
Sure as fuck did.
Yeah.
Yep.
Babe, you mentioned
much I
that this
liked it.
one had its comedic bits, and it did. But what impressed me was the balance that this movie struck between those comedic elements and how well they were kind of woven into the story. Not overdone, didn't necessarily come out of nowhere. They felt organic, I guess, to the story and to the characters. And that's important, I think, in a movie like this. Even for a kids movie, and a lot of kids movies are way over the top with the comedy and zany and slapstick and stuff. This movie really wasn't that. I think what got me though about the relationship between Orion Pax and D16 before they became Optimus and Megatron was how much of a tragedy this story really is, right? You do feel, I think, by 3/4 or almost all the way through the movie, you feel you feel for you like D16, right? You and Mega and Orion Pax, and you love their friendship, and you see them on different trajectories, right, from the beginning. That starts out pretty close, they're buddy, and but slowly like diverges, right, from each other. And there's a lot of tragic emotional elements to that are, I think, really well felt. And to me, that's what sets this movie apart from the usual clash and bang Transformers stuff.
Well, it's character-driven story that's also based off of, at least in a way that I think makes sense to like families and kids. It's not like necessarily the most complex thing in the world, but it's telling the world of like it's set in a world where there is socio-political machinations in place that are designed to stratify people, right? And so, we even follow that from the beginning. These are the minors. Our two main characters are minors who don't have cogs, so they can't transform. So they're seen as less than from the very outset of this movie. And that informs very much how they go from there. And I think that's, this is sort of a primer that, an Optimus primer on for young families on, okay, well, what do you do when, your government isn't looking out for you? Do you fight within the power, the structure of power, or do you fight from outside of it? And that's sort of the direction that the two main characters have to navigate through this. I think that's really compelling, but again, in a way that's understandable to families. This isn't this isn't the most complex thing in the world, but it does still explore some pretty heavy territory.
It reminds me of some of the old like Star Trek morality play episodes, right? Like you're getting your sci-fi, you're getting your cool shit, but you're also getting like relevant social commentary. And it's really cool the way that this film does it. I think we're a little hamstrung though in getting into this discussion as much as we'd like, because we're still in our non-spoiler section. How do you gents feel about making that jump into Spoiler Town?
Yeah, just like Orion and D were John hamstrung by Sentinel Prime. Yeah. Okay. Well. Okay.
It's good. We like it. We're okay with it.
Good.
Let's go.
Because not to be elitist, but I'm kind of over non-spoiler. Okay, that one was really bad. I'm sorry.
All right, let's pax this one up and move on.
Before I star scream. Anyway, okay, we're done. We're done with the no, we're probably
Brad, you're alpha trying too hard.
Oh goodness. All right. Well, we're going to go ahead and open things up to spoilers for the next 15 minutes or so. If you have not yet seen Transformers 1, go see it. It's really fucking good, especially if Jim called it out as a great Transformers film. That's huge. And then come on back for the rest of this discussion. If you're watching live right now, we'll see you in 15 minutes, hopefully, for our discussion of The Wild Robot. If you're listening on digital tape delay, go ahead and skip ahead using that time index. Do what you got to do. But spoilers are fair game. Where do y'all want to start with this one?
I'll just start with something that was I just want to make note of, and that was that I thought it was interesting how they Will, you touched on kind of the stratification of the society, right, and how the government, kind of kept certain classes of people or certain classes of characters down. And Orion and D kind of started in the same place, but they had different ways of kind of attacking their lot in life, right? And that was what's led to their different trajectories. But I thought it was interesting, this whole idea of the cogs, that like they're born or they're born with these cogs. Although I would like to see how robots are born. Like, is it robot sex in some world? I don't know. But like,
well, I don't know that it's that they're born without cogs. I think Sentinel Prime.
No, they're born with
tripping.
cogs. Yeah,
Yes.
they're born with cogs, and then they, I guess, at birth, Sentinel Prime and his minions just go in and take the cogs out and use them, I guess, for themselves or whatever. And I kept thinking, oh, it's kind of like circumcision in a way. You know what I mean? Like,
Whoa.
they just they go in and modify these newborns and steal part of their body for whatever. I don't know. It's a little different.
You're
it's
not
a little different.
No, you're not wrong. I would imagine, Jim, that if you were to go to every single whiteboard on every single writer's wall that worked at any point in this Transformers movie, never once will they have listed circumcision on any of those boards.
Circumcised, uncut.
But I will say that the way I hear you describe it just now, I don't hate the analogy. So it does kind of work.
So are we all like gonna go on a journey and like meet this really old guy that like plucks foreskins from dead guys and like puts them on us?
I guess. I don't know. I said it's a little different, but like there is a version of this movie coming out called Transformers 1 Uncut. I'm just saying.
Goodness.
No, but but seriously, I did like that element that a part of them was like stolen from them at birth, right? And kept them from being from reaching their full potential in order to, keep them down as laborers, miners, whatever. I just like that plot device. Because it did drive a lot of the story as well.
Sure, and we can even take that analogy kind of to a more to maybe a less literal space as well, and say that this happens a lot of times with in certain communities where you may be denied the same educational access, you may be denied the same opportunities, the same career paths, the same autonomy, the same ability to walk down the street without being harassed, just because of the societal structures that have been put in place to keep you there since before you were born. And so I think that's complicated stuff for like a 7-year-old to have to navigate, and that may be one of the target audiences here. But this does introduce them to the fact that sometimes things are made, sometimes things are not fair because they were designed to be unfair. And that once you understand that, I think you become more likely to stand up for the things that you're supposed to stand up for. So regardless of what it is that's taken from you before you're born, it's good to have this message out there for kids. And again, it works really well with the characters as well. So even outside of the morality side of things, it just makes for a cool backdrop for this cool story about robots. So win-win, I guess.
Yep, absolutely true. I also love the parallels between I don't know how explicitly I want to call this out, but the parallels between like a political leader lying to people and misrepresenting truth and doing really shady shit on the back end to make himself look great when in reality he's a fucking monster.
And he's kowtowing to another quote unquote world power to try to keep his to try to keep his authority over his
Yep.
people. There is
Yeah.
something in the writing of this movie, and
Right.
it's not accidental. I'm pretty
And
sure.
don't forget the part where the people who are fucking intentionally kept downtrodden and poor and in service worship him because he does these grandstanding, like
Right.
public things to make people
Right.
love him, and they
Right.
can't see past it. Until, of course, proof is presented to them. And it's a movie because in the movie, when the proof is presented, everyone turns against him. Unlike in real life, when the proof is presented over and over and over again,
over
and they
and
still
over.
fucking worship him. You
Yeah.
know, so that's why it's fantasy, right? Science fiction,
Right.
bitches.
Right.
Unrelated, just unrelated to everything that you just said. This is just an aside, has nothing to do with what you just said. But here it's October 1st. A lot of states right now, this is we're coming up on the cutoff period for voter registration. So
yeah.
again, this has nothing to do with the point that you guys just made.
Not at all. Not
But
at all.
if you're not
Yeah.
registered to vote in this upcoming election, now would be a great time to do so.
Do it.
Anyways, that was a weird aside. It had nothing to do with anything. Back to what you were saying about this grandstanding leader, despot, who was seizing power through manipulation.
I think we made the point on that, and I would, and it was the movie I thought did it really well. I kind of want to steer away a little bit from that because something else that really impressed me about this movie was, Will, you mentioned some of the animation was great, and some of it was maybe a little bit jumbled, especially during some of the battle scenes. I love the portrayal of this world, right? Cybertron, the planet and the world, and like the upside down, the upside down world that they were in, and then they went to the top, like on this train where the tracks like go in front of the train. I thought that was really cool. And then when they got up there, it was totally different. It was like more of a natural world, I guess, right? And it was, I mean, it was beautiful. There was wildlife up there, some form of like weird wildlife up there. I just thought that was really well done, and I'm glad we got to see some of that in this movie, and it wasn't totally glossed over and kind of ignored.
Yeah, I agree. Like the idea that these transformers are made of living metal is super fucking cool. But then to get up on the surface, I guess, of Cybertron and see like versions of animals that are also made of this living metal was just really neat. And I don't know that I've ever seen a Cybertron like that before. Like in everything else I've seen with Transformers, it's all just like, like in industrial metal versions of cities and stuff. So that was kind of a cool treat. And it's nice because we kind of go on this journey with the characters, right? Where we find out that like Sentinel Prime is really fucking kowtowing to the Quintessons, and he is propping himself up. But we also discover that Cybertron, which runs on Energon, is literally the lifeblood of this planet and the Transformers. The glowy blue, like lava-ish stuff that they turn into little things that they ingest. The Energon stopped flowing on Cybertron, right? So, like, whether you're on the surface of the planet or you're underground, that's why all these people are fucking having to do all this mining because of what has happened. The primes of the past, Alpha Trion, who had the Matrix of Leadership, they were fucking killed by the Quintessons, and that's why the Energon dried up. That's why all of this happened. Sentinel Prime could have taken steps to try and truly fix it, but because he's who he is,
wasn't Energon what he was giving to the Overlord of
and it was the stuff that like Orion Pax and D16 were mining. So most of the stuff they were mining wasn't even going to like support the people, right? It was to these evil aliens. So anyway, my favorite part of this movie, but also it's also a little bit of a cop-out, so I have conflicted feelings, is like the MacGuffin part of this. They have to find the Matrix of Leadership to restore the flow of Energon to the planet, right? And so we go on this journey, and thankfully it leads our folks to Alpha Trion, and he gives them their transformation cogs. They become true Transformers. By the end of the film, Will, kind of that like opposing trajectory thing you were talking about, we arrive at this moment where, because Sentinel Prime has been revealed, D16 wants to fucking just murder him and like take over. And Orion Pax is like, no, that's not right. We can't do that. And D16 is like, okay, cool, bye. And just drops him into a fucking chasm where he, you think is going to die. And that's where the MacGuffin is bestowed on Orion Pax. And he becomes Optimus Prime. And then, because of the Matrix of Leadership,
What?
the energon starts flowing. All of the miners who had their cogs removed magically get new cogs implanted in their chest. Everybody becomes Transformers in their true right. So while it's cool for like all the energon to come back and everyone to get their cogs, I also feel like it kind of robs some of the, like, I don't know, some of the gravitas. It's like a magic reset button that just fixes everything. I don't know if that was conflicting for you all, but it seemed like an easy out.
I think it might be an easy out, but I think that it's sort of if we're talking about this as a morality story, I think this is to give us hope for it's not too late to take back power away from those who would abuse that power and to put it in the hands of those who might be more respectful of the natural order of things and be more respectful of people that kind of lower into the stratification. It's definitely like, if I were to talk about it in sort of like modern political terms, it definitely lands under kind of like the neoliberal kind of like optimism umbrella, all we have to do is the opposite of bad and all of a sudden we're good.
Wait, optimism?
The optimism, yeah.
Optimism.
Yeah. But I do think that there's value in that because it sort of keeps despair and pessimism from standing in the way of doing the right thing. Sometimes you can be so fatalistic about the way things are that you just enable them to keep being that way. And this film says, hey, it's not too late, to be the right type of leader, to elect the right type of leaders, to take back the, to reverse climate change or whatever it happens to be that you want
to not go back.
Oh, there we go.
There
we go. Yeah.
But that said, within the fiction of the movie itself, there was a part where I was sitting there going like, man, Primus is kind of a dick if he's just sort of like, down at basically at the core of the earth, just going like, well, you know what? If they like that guy, fuck them all. Like, let them starve. I don't care. Okay, they changed to a different guy. All right, bounty. So I do get that, but again, it's I get where the plot device is going.
We've got a comment from D Geek Will. Hey, other Will, good to see you. He says, not sure if this was mentioned yet, but I love the small detail of Dee's eyes throughout the movie. They go from a bright gold to blood red as he slowly turns. That was a small detail I loved. Yeah, and in fact, like that moment where he drops Orion Pax into the chasm, like, and his eyes change, it's like, you fucking know, like, he's become Megatron at that point. And Brian Tyree Henry just fucking turns it on at that point. Yeah. And it's probably one of the most menacing Megatrons I've seen in anything Transformers related. And I got chills.
Yeah.
D-Geek Will. Literal chills when that
happens. The thing is, it's coming and you're still terrified when it happens. You know what I mean? And that's, again, credit to the movie for that. And who was Badassatron? Who was that?
That was Keegan Michael Key. Yeah.
Yep.
Bumblebee.
Yeah.
Badassatron.
Oh goodness. Well, it's so nice to have a Transformers movie that so many people are just loving so much. I haven't seen anyone who's seen this film that didn't just gush about it afterwards, which isn't to say that'll be everyone's experience, but I think it's a pretty good sign, right? That this is a Transformers film for the ages, maybe. So if you haven't seen it yet, but you listen to spoilers anyway, hopefully you'll still enjoy when you do watch it. But I feel really lucky that we got this film. I definitely hope that we get a follow-up. We'll see what happens. But Yeah, this is pretty damn special.
Yeah, as far as animated robot movies, it's going to be very difficult to beat this one.
It may be.
All right.
We'll
Well,
see.
along those lines, it's kind of a wild idea to pit them against each other. Will, but we'll have to see. We're going to go ahead. I think switch gears again and move on to our next movie review.
Good one.
So we're going to move on to our discussion of The Wild Robot. Just as we mentioned before, if you haven't seen The Wild Robot yet, not to worry. We're going to talk about it spoiler free for about 10 minutes or so, and then we'll give you plenty of warning before we open things up to spoilers. So hang around. We're making the jump. Here we go. Our discussion of The Wild Robot. All right. Will, do us a favor. Set this one up. What is The Wild Robot? And what were your, spoiler free, of course, initial thoughts on the film?
Yeah, so The Wild Robot is a new DreamWorks animated picture, directed by Chris Sanders, who, gosh, he's given us a few things, but he's done a lot of like television as well as worked on some of the stuff for The Croods. Yeah, he directed The Crude. He was one of the directors on, like Lilo and Stitch and How to Train Your Dragon. He's worked very closely with, friend of our community, Dean Dubois, who's kind of a producer and kind of inspiration on these films. And one of the through lines you'll see on a lot of those movies, How to Train Your Dragon, Lilo and Stitch, and here in The Wild Robot, is that a found family, which I think is especially important to us as queer people. But this story follows there's this sort of shipwreck and this robot that's designed for service. Its job is to do tasks and to help people, named Roz. It's stranded on this island where there are no people, no one to help out, just animals and wildlife. So Roz starts to bond with the local animals, learns the languages, and finally finds a task, the thing that Roz most wants in the world. And that task is to care for this orphaned baby goose. So Roz is voiced by Lupita Nyong'o, who is just so damned good in this. We also have voice acting from Pedro Pascal, who plays a rascally fox named Fink. Kit Connor plays the goose himself, Bright Bill. We've got Bill Nye, Matt Berry, Stephanie Hsu, Ving Rhames, Mark Hamill, Catherine O'Hara, all showing up and doing, again, just sort of stellar voice acting work. I loved this movie, and I know I kind of set it up before. I really enjoyed Transformers 1. It exceeded expectations, which was surprising for me to then come in and have that be the second best animated robot movie that we're reviewing this week. The Wild Robot is really something special. This is the type of movie that you will want to bring a whole box of tissues to because it will make you cry. There are moments in this that gave me, while not for the exact same reason, but another robot movie that I remember making me cry is The Iron Giant, because there are just some singular moments of connectivity within that movie that will always stand out in my head. Just these scenes that encapsulate everything that the film was building towards and everything that that film meant to me and other viewers. And The Wild Robot has those types of scenes as well. There's a scene, and we'll talk about it in spoilers, but I'll just say right now it's a scene that involves running that is just permanently now seared in my brain in terms of just how well it connected those characters and connected them to me. Yeah, I love this movie. It's beautifully animated too. Like, this movie looks damn good. There's a glow that Roz has, just sort of like the little lines on her circular body. I mean, she's a relatively unexpressive robot as far as robots go. In the Transformers movies, they had faces that looked human and kind of morphed around and did stuff. We don't really have that with Roz, and yet she is so emotive. You can tell what she's thinking and what she's feeling, and she's processing this world that she's unfamiliar with, and how she interacts with and learns from all the creatures around her. Gosh, this movie is something really special. It's beautiful. It's well written. It's well directed. It's well voice acted. There is a strong world where this is DreamWorks' submission for the Oscars this next year. And gosh, I'd have to really think about what else has come out that's been animated this year. But this might be my front runner, unless I'm forgetting something pretty dramatic. The Wild Robot's good. I can't gush about it enough. So I'll stop gushing about it and let y'all weigh in whichever way you will. I legit don't know which way this is going to go. To give you an idea, my old winner for the year was Inside Out 2, and I think this trumps it for me.
All right. Well, Will, thank you so much for that setup and giving us a little gush bath. Jim, how about you? How did this movie land for you?
Yeah, I really like this movie also. I was looking forward to this movie for a long time. It's right up my alley. Will, you mentioned Iron Giant, which is one of my all-time favorite animated movies, also featuring a robot. I think this movie kind of, borrows a little bit of DNA from that movie in terms of like its emotional core, because, it's a robot kind of fish out of water, and it gets you to kind of be emotionally invested in this character right from the beginning. I loved it. The voice cast was great. This was another one where we're trying to, I knew Lupita Nyong'o because she was like featured on all the posters and stuff, but I didn't look at really any of the others, and we're trying to figure out who all these characters are. And oh god, we fell pretty flat. I think babe, you got a couple of them easy. But I wasn't even on board with the ones that you had. But I really liked it. In a way, we'll talk about it maybe more in spoilers, but I almost wish a movie like this have to walk the line again between being a kids movie and something a little bit headier, a little shooting a little higher. And I think the dialogue and having everybody speaking from the beginning was good, I think, for some audiences, but for me, I think there could have even been stronger if there was less of the dialogue. Maybe if Roz wasn't as vocal, you know what I mean, or something like that. I don't know. That's not the movie that we got, so I'm not. I can't really wish for that. But because if you remember, like DreamWorks' best animated movie, How to Train Your Dragon. You have a dragon in that film that, spoilers, doesn't speak, right? And you feel right away for that character. But like I said, voice acting's great. I think the story is wonderful. Will, I think I know the scene you're talking about. I think that's the one that got me crying the hardest. Did that same scene involve flying?
It may have.
I think it's.
We're thinking the same scene. Yeah.
Yeah, it was really great, really well done. To me, the emotional center of the film. But yeah, I loved it. I think people should see this film. I hope people are seeing this film. I hope families are seeing this film. This is a great film, really about motherhood. This film is about mothers. If this film doesn't make you think about, your mother or other great mothers in your life or in, that's what it's doing. And I think it does it very well.
All right. Well, Jim, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us. It seems like two gushes in a row. is this going to be a 3 gush
I'm gushing all
movie?
over the place. Yeah.
Should I open up a pack of gushers?
Yeah, just something. Get me a towel or something.
All right. So for myself, I fucking love this movie so much. It was so good, and I agree. If it's Optimus Prime versus Roz, I love them both for different reasons. But if I had to give it to one movie or the other, you know me, I judge movies on how much they made me feel. And as triumphant as I felt with Transformers 1, this movie hit emotionally resonant places that like just came out of nowhere. And I was like bawling at this movie. At one point, like I made this like hitch sound in my chest and this like squeak escaped me and I didn't even know that it was happening. I'm like, who's making that sound? And then I'm like, oh, my face is wet. It's me. I'm making that sound. You mentioned, Jim, that this movie is really a movie about like motherhood, but I think it's also a film about just like the family that we make, right?
Community,
and how friendships and community can often be just as powerful, right, in your life as a parental figure. And so, without of course going into spoilers, there's some other characters in this film that help Roz to raise this little baby Gosling. And some pretty fucking incredible stuff happens. And so I'll probably not go too much more into it beyond just saying there were a couple voices that I recognized. One of them was Pedro Pascal as Fink the Fox, but he's like totally doing an American accent.
I still don't know how you did that one.
Oh, well, I think it's because I'm used to like hearing his voice but seeing The Mandalorian, so it's like it's like the voice is more in my head than like what he looks like. But not only that, there's a couple times where he's being like really serious in how he's talking to Roz, where I almost hear Joel from The Last of Us, and it's kind of awesome. Yeah. So anyway, Pedro Pascal, I think, did an exceptional job here. Also, huge call out to Ving Rhames. He plays a really fun character in this film, and I heard that voice, and instantly I was like, "Fuck, it's Ving Rhames!" Really great voice cast here. Lupita Nyong'o, like, for playing a fucking robot, like Jesus, like just with her voice, she's able to do so much, and it's awesome. I didn't know going into the movie that this movie was actually based on a book. It's actually 3 books. I'm about halfway through the first book right now. And I think so far, at least, the movie does it better than the book. But that's because there's some like weird just ways that the book is written and formatted. But I'm really excited to like get to the second book and the third book and see what happens. But I'm also like, shit, I want sequels to this movie. Maybe I don't read the next books and I wait for the sequels. But then I go to Box Office Mojo and see this thing has only made like $50 million worldwide. And, it's been out for a little bit too. And I don't know if we're going to get a sequel. So I don't know what to do. Would you read the next book, guys? Or would you wait and hope that this thing gets a sequel in a few years?
Read the next book anyway, because even if it does, it's going to be a few years, right? Like you mentioned. So... that's a long time to wait for the continuation of a story. So yeah, watch it, and then you can come in and see how they compare.
That's a good thought.
Yeah,
there we go.
I would say definitely read the book.
All right.
Once you finish the first one and you're ready to go, just don't spoil me or fucking go bananas.
I promise. You have my word. I won't. All right.
I would like to mention a little bit about kind of my viewing experience with it, because I had this as part of like a really good like back-to-back viewing experience that I recommend. So like I mentioned, this one is one I saw at a film festival. This one played at Fantastic Fest. We got to see it was in one of the premiere statuses. This was my morning. Remember how we'd sometimes see like those 10 a.m., 11 a.m. So this was my like 11 a.m. movie. Right after this was this tearjerker stop motion animated film about family and loss called Memoir of a Snail. And then right after that, I watched Will and Harper, which later premiered on Netflix and was
That
about
was so good.
the tearjerker road trip between. So I had 3 cries in a row, like for this like horror and action genre festival. I started my Friday morning just with
Wait,
bawling.
it was Friday Cry Day.
It was Friday
Well,
Cry Day. That's
Yeah.
what it is. Friday Cry Day. So
You had no tears left by the end, I bet.
Yeah. So I would recommend, if you get a chance to watch this one, you haven't seen it yet. Memoir of a Snail is not out yet, although if you can find it, watch it with it. But to mimic my experience, go watch this in theaters. Like, go right now, go watch it, and then come back home, load up Netflix, and watch Will and Harper. They're both good stories about people finding one another who might not normally have found each other, but they've kind of formed their own little found family amongst each other. And I think that is a cool double feature that I got to experience, and you can too, through the magic of just watching the things where they appear.
There you go. All right. Well, fellas, how do we feel about making the jump into Spoiler Town?
Yes, let's.
Yeah. Squawk,
All right.
squawk.
Very cool. All right. So we are going to go ahead and make that jump into Spoiler Town, as aforementioned. If you've not yet seen The Wild Robot, I don't often say this because I don't like to influence people necessarily, but like maybe do yourself a favor, skip the spoiler section, go see it, come back. At the end of the day, you make your own choices, but I think it's going to be so much more powerful if you see it first before you hear spoilers. But you get to choose that. I don't. Just some friendly advice from me. But we are going to go ahead and spoil the plot of this film. So if you continue to listen, you do so at your own peril. Jim, Will, spoilers are totally fair game. Where do you want to jump in?
I'm going to jump in kind of at the start. I thought it was very interesting how this film started. It started out, it's kind of like a cold open, right? I think it starts like right. There's no explanation. It starts out kind of right on the beach where there's been some kind of crash and there's debris around, and we see Roz. What we eventually learn is Roz on the beach, damaged, and the animals kind of looking at her. I thought that was a pretty cool way to like draw the audience in right away without too much dialogue, which I think can be very powerful in these films. But I think the world that they created was interesting because, most of the film takes place on this, what seems like an island or some kind of natural world, not a nation, but a natural world land. And then somewhere else, either on another planet or on another part. Well, no, it's in another part of this planet. There is this like ultra modern like city or something going on. It's not super explained in the movie, which is fine with me because that's not really what the movie's about. But it did really pique my interest about that. And babe, I don't know if maybe the books go into way more detail about kind of the world where Roz is from versus the world that's outside of that, like the natural world, and kind of the relationship between those two worlds and what role that the robots kind of play in that. It's a little bit unclear, I guess, in the movie, which is not, again, it's not a criticism. It's just, it piqued my interest and I'm like, ooh, I kind of want to know more about that.
Yeah. I don't think there are really any book spoilers to give here. I think it follows, at least so far, pretty closely. It does the same thing the movie does in terms of like, we see, or in my case, read about like the crate that Roz like washes up in, right? And how it has like a company logo on the side. And there's like a, there's like marketing material for these robots and but it's really just like Roz in her environment out in the wild and her adventure. So it very much mirrors the movie. But you were mentioning this whole like fish out of water thing, like a robot that is meant to be a service robot in like a family household is now in the fucking wilds. And all the animals are of course, talking about the movie, not the book. All the animals are afraid of her, right? She's the monster.
The monster, yeah.
And so there's this whole sequence of events that happens where she's having these misadventures, and I didn't expect this to happen, but she lands on the nest of Bright Bill's parents, and we see the dead, crumpled wings of Bright Bill's parents like underneath her as she's like struggling to like get up. And there's other cracked eggs from Bright Bill's possible brothers and sisters, and then there's one egg, and that was heartbreaking enough. And then she opens her chest and just puts the egg inside. And I'm like, Jesus Christ, robot, you've been like falling down mountains, and this egg is just going to like rumble around inside your hollow chest.
Scrambled
Like, come on.
inside. Yeah.
Thank goodness we solved for that pretty quick, and Bright Bill came to be. But really from that moment in the film, I know I bring this up a lot on the show, but like as someone who has lost a parent, having lost my mom, it was kind of healing to see Roz like become this stand-in mother for Bright Bill and like try to do right by him and make up for the mistake that she inadvertently made, and what happened to his family. And I don't know that I have seen motherhood portrayed in quite that way in a film before. And a lot of it is even done without dialogue, just in how she like picks Bright Bill up and like puts him like on her shoulder, like in the crook of her neck. Babe, it reminded me a lot of how Cora like settles down in the crook of your neck and sleeps on you that way. And you're her wild robot.
Yeah, I guess I am. Yeah, and it was interesting that they did that. And thinking on it now, it kind of it takes a page out of that old Disney trope. You know what I mean? Like kill off the parents and in the first part of the movie and make it a tragedy to start with, and then Bambi eventually develops, like falls into kind of like another community and family situation with all the other animals. This is very similar to that, except the only difference being that in this case, Bright Bill is not aware of his, the tragedy that befell, his or her parents at the beginning of the movie. And it's heartbreaking when, it's disclosed that Roz, inadvertently played a hand in that, right? That's heartbreaking on both sides.
There's something about this movie that really reminds me of the importance of execution when it comes to story beats, right? And specifically what I mean is when you really look at what this film is made up of, there isn't necessarily any like new territory being covered here, right? We've seen found family. We've seen stories that have that liar revealed moment where, the truth comes out and they have to reconcile with it. We've seen stories of people coming together to overcome adversity. We've seen, lovable ragtag animals having to team up to overcome some form of obstacle with third act shenanigans. But what this film does is it takes all those elements and it does them with sincerity and it does them well, right? So all that to say, you don't necessarily have to reinvent the wheel to tell a good story. You just have to tell the story well. And this story tells it incredibly well. You can feel what's happening. You can relate to it. You can find your own personal experiences and attach those to the characters. Of course, we talked about the surrogate mother-son relationship that we get here between Roz and Bright Bill. But we also have this character who in the Pedro Pascal character,
Fink,
who is someone who is sort of resigned to never being. He's not a family person. He's the type of person who's used to being alone. He's this type
predator.
Of person
he's a predator.
Yeah, he's used to sort of having his own way in the world, and what he finds is community with people who, he cares for and who care for him back, both for what he is and for what he doesn't realize that he is. And I think that's powerful too. I think you can relate to that type of character as well as you can relate to the Roz or the Brightville. And I think all of us can relate to all those characters in different ways at times in our lives. So, yeah.
It's really interesting to me, and some of the more emotional beats of this film came from the Fink character. How Fink, maybe against what he thought was his nature, discovered that he was really looking for like a mother and community himself. Like there are just moments where like you can see Fink watching Roz with Bright Bill, and he's looking between them. And you can just tell from his eyes and his like body language that he is longing for that kind of like relationship and closeness, whether that's with Roz or, you know, somebody else. Like he's never had that. And I don't know, like I think it's really resonant for anyone who's ever been on the outside of like, maybe you're watching a really loving, you know, family, and maybe you never had that, and so you feel on the outside of it, you want it, but it also kind of makes you like resent it and like double down, like, oh, I don't need that, you know. And then later on you realize, yeah, you really fucking did, and hopefully you've now got it, and you're much happier for it. That was really neat how that was portrayed.
One of the voices in this film we totally whiffed on, and we shouldn't have. He's probably one of the most well-known voice actors for like this genre of movie, and that's Mark Hamill as Thorn the bear. Never even came close to guessing his voice until we saw it in the end. Like, oh my god, that's Mark Hamill. We should have got that.
Yeah, and it's also funny too, the voice of Paddler the beaver.
Oh yeah,
I'm like, fuck, I know this voice. What do I know this voice from? Why can't I identify it? It's fucking Matt Berry from What We Do in the Shadows, which we just started watching a few weeks ago. Yeah. And I'm like, oh shit, no wonder we know that voice. Like, God.
Catherine O'Hara's Pinktail was a standout for me. Of course, anything she's in, I'm all over. She was one of the strongest parts of Beetlejuice for me. And you're right. Yeah. Mark Hamill, he didn't have a lot in this, but it was solid what he did. And I'm looking forward to, he's actually going to be in, I believe he's in Life of Chuck, which is coming out very soon, which is the new Mike Flanagan, Stephen King adaptation. So there's a lot of good Mark Hamill stuff on the horizon that between this and that I'm excited for.
So speaking of the bear, I got to call something out. And I need to see the movie again to confirm. Well, okay, I need to see it again. But there's this moment after like they've created the big nest domicile, and Roz has like rescued all the animals, and they're all together, right? And then Fink gives this big speech about like, they need to cooperate. And anyway, as they're all like nestling down to rest, the big grumpy bear grabs another animal. And I can't remember if it was a squirrel or if it was one of the otters. But the squirrel or otter or whatever looks at the bear, looks around, looks at the bear, gets this like giddy smile, and then like cuddles up and nestles up to the bear. And I'm like, I probably know about 1,000 chasers who get that same look on their face when they want to cuddle with a nice furry
I believe it has to be an otter. Like
the bear and the otter combo. Okay.
Yeah. It's got to be an otter. I mean, it would make sense, right? I just given one of the creative forces behind the movie, you would think a bear and an otter would be a cool little reference, but not super overt reference.
Well, yeah, because Will, you were mentioning how like certainly Dean is a producer, but the director as well had worked previously on like Lilo and Stitch and How to Train Your Dragon. Lilo and Stitch, Lilo is fascinated with like bigger people, and she calls them beautiful, right? In How to Train Your Dragon, you had the fucking awesome Vikings, and they were treated with a lot of love, and were they a couple? Were they not? Question mark, right? So I'm watching this play out, and I'm like, oh yeah, they knew.
There it is. There it is.
When
Right
they did
there.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, I
That's
wanted
fun.
to ask you guys what you thought of the ending. I'm not sure I'm remembering the ending fully, but Roz ends up back at her like station, right? Or does she come
Yes.
back? Right? Yeah. How did that sit with you guys? And I know that Bright Bill grows up and eventually visits there on the migration, I guess. Yeah, it's I don't know. It kind of made me sad to see Roz in that environment, even if she's, and she seemed like kind of a worker bee, right? In that environment, it almost, I don't know. To me, it felt like, okay, she's back in that environment. They put her back to work. That's where she belongs. That's where she has to go. It kind of made me sad. It wasn't really your typical quote unquote happy storybook ending.
But let me ask you this: did they put her back there, or did she put herself back there?
I think it was partly her because she wanted to protect the animals because she knew that they would keep coming after her, right? I mean, they burned most of the island or whatever in the search. So to protect the animals that she loved and her family there, she had to leave, which is sad, right? It's a sad ending. It's not a happy ending. Yeah.
But I think the hopeful part of it is that, because we're in spoilers, when Bright Bill shows back up, during the next migration, Roz had all her memories and shit like sucked out of her brain, right? Like supposedly everything that made Roz, different and defy her program was removed so that she would be subservient and, factory reset. But what we find out is that it's her heart that really carried all of that. There was something inside her, right, that remembered Bright Bill. I'm getting emotional, but I think that's so just cool that, like, I don't know. I think about, I'll collect myself. I think about like my grandpa who had Alzheimer's, and he lost those memories, but he's still kind of new, and like those feelings would come out, and that closeness was there, even though he didn't remember who I was, even though he couldn't remember, his ABCs or count to 1 to 10. Like there was an emotional thing there, right? That still tethered us and connected us. And so, I feel like that kind of happened here, right? Like seeing Bright Bill again, like brought that back. And that's why I so want a sequel so bad. And I guess I'm going to read the next book because I want to see what happens now that Roz like has her memory and her love back. Like, what does she do? Does she stay there? She can't go back to the island because they'll follow her back. So like, does she and Bright Bill go somewhere new and start a new life? I don't know, but I want to know.
Yeah, that's the thing about this one is that there's that meta knowledge, right? And specifically, we know that there's 2 more stories. Whether or not they make it to screen or not, they exist in the book form, right? So we know that this isn't necessarily the end of this story. So it's not the finale of, these 2 characters have landed at these different spots and this is where they're at. There's more story to be told. But even if there weren't, I think there is some value in stories that are, especially these types of stories that are not just sweet, but also bittersweet. Because it allows you to, and there's room for both. I don't think that one is inherently better than the other. It's how they're executed and how they're done and how they resonate. And I think that there's something to be said for stories that going back to Inside Out, there's room for these stories that have the happiness tinged with the sadness because both of them make each other more potent, right?
Yeah, I think you hit on it, Will. It's definitely a bittersweet ending, right? It has the bitter part is that they're not, Roz is separated from the world that we know her in. You know what I mean? That we've come to love her being a part of, but she's still connected with them somehow, especially through Bright Bill.
Yeah. I know we kind of set up this whole like battle of the bots thing, which is fun. But I'm looking back at my Letterboxd. I mean, well, if it's an actual battle, I mean, of course, Optimus Prime would destroy Roz. But in terms of the better movie, at least for me, I think it's The Wild Robot. But here's my dilemma. I'm looking back at my letterbox right now, and I rated Inside Out 2 5 stars with a heart. And I rated The Wild Robot 5 stars with a heart. What the fuck am I going to do if I have to pick one of those for my top 10 of 2024?
You're going to have to pick one of them to be higher than the other at some point, even if that's your 1 and your 2 or whatever that lands. One of them's a 1, one of them's a 2. Fortunately, we've got a few months to make that decision. You have time for these to sit with you.
And you're going to see both of them again.
You're probably going to get to see both of them again, but you're going to have time for these to rumble around in your brain and your heart and your gut, and to just sort of say, okay, 3 months have passed, 6 months have passed. When I think back on these, this one makes me feel X, this one makes me feel Y. And that decision is going to be made in the moment and may not be what the final decision is, a year from now, 2 years from now, but you'll land on it. We always do.
I'll be surprised if I even know which one is 1 and which one is 2 when we hit the go live button for that show.
Yep.
Like I probably will decide when we get to the number 2 round, like which one it's going to be.
Are those your only 2 5 stars of the year so far?
Ooh, that's a good question. Let me sort by rating here.
I'm scouring through your letterboxd and Challengers.
Oh yeah, Challenges was a 5. Billy and Molly, an Otter love story, was a 5.
Another Otter movie. Who
knew?
There you go. All of Us Strangers.
Does that count as 2024 though? Because didn't we talk about it for 2023?
You get to kind of count where you want it to go. I believe I had it in my top 10 for 2023 because it technically released at the end of last year, but these are our own lists, so fucking whatever. No one's gonna judge us poorly, on that.
That's the rule for me. If I got to view it, if I got to see it, and rate it, review it in before our end of year show, our top of 2023 last year, then I won't do it again. Obviously.
I think what I'm going to have to do is look up our spreadsheet. And Will, if you have the link somewhere handy, maybe you're faster. Yeah. But I think it was my number 1 of 2023. Because I
actually think it was. I'll double check, but it won't take me long while we're chatting.
Yeah. So I may have to discount All of Us Strangers for this year. But you know what? It makes more room to have both of these films.
That's right. That's the bright side.
In my top
10. Yep. You had that as your number 1 for 2023.
Both of us probably.
Yep. So I think you saw it before we did that episode, and you were able to. Yeah.
Cool. Well,
and it was number 1 for us combined as well when we averaged all 3 of us together. It was our number 1. Yep.
Wow. Interesting. Well, now I can't wait for that episode for this year.
That's good because it's a totally different kind of movie than these kind of, you know what I mean? Really? I don't know. Feels like it's in a totally different
it does.
Universe,
Well, another great film. I'm so glad that we all got a chance to see this and talk about it. I can't wait to see it again and maybe even a third time. I really want to find out if that was an otter or a squirrel now that was hugging the bear. But I'm glad we got a chance to do this. Shall we look to wrap things up, guys? Are we at that point, we think?
I think so.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, then, in that case, we are going to be back with you next week relative to when we're recording. Looks like October 8th of 2024, reviewing Joker, Folie à Deux. Is that how you pronounce it? Folie à Deux? What is it?
I don't know.
It's Joker,
I didn't take French.
Joker 2.
Joker, Folie à Douche. That's what it is.
Folie à Douche.
Folie à Douche.
Okay.
Yeah.
Folie à Douche. How do you say in French blowing smoke into somebody's mouth through jail bars?
Oh, you that is and my pronunciation is going to be a little off. It's
That's pretty good. All right. Well, we'll be back with you next week for that for sure, and then we'll kind of figure it out from there. But in case folks want to chat with us between now and when we record again, Jim, where can folks connect with you?
Oh, connect with me on Letterboxd, and they're on there. That's an app or a website that you can go to and find me under my screen name at JJP Out West and see all the films that I've rated and reviewed over the last few years. Anyway, you can also find me on Facebook under my regular name, Jim Pugliafico.
All right. Thank you so much. Will, how about you? Where can people connect?
Yeah, Facebook is where you find me socially. Just look for me on there. Look for William Lindis. Give me an ad. I overshare there, so come join that train if you'd like. Aside from that, if you want to follow movie stuff, Letterboxd is the place to go. I'm at the Movie Bear there. By the time that I'm done catching up on all the things that I saw at the festival and a few things afterwards, I'll have logged 222 movies this year. So come find out if you're looking for recommendations of what to watch and what to never watch. You can always just look through my star ratings there and see if something lines up with your taste or not. But yeah, just give me a follow on Letterboxd. It's a fun place to be if you're a movie fan.
All right. Thanks, Will. Folks, you can find me on Facebook. Just look for Brad Harris. The other Brad Harris took his Confederate flag down again. He has a different picture now.
I know.
Which is weird.
Funny because I looked for that Brad Harris last week, and I'm like,
"Oh, did you?
Where's
Where's
the Confederate flag guy that Brad keeps talking about?"
It's the really skinny Brad Harris with like the longer like goatee. He had a picture of himself with a Confederate flag as of like 2 weeks ago. It's weird that he'd take it down before election season, but like whatever, okay. Anyway, look for me. I'm the one who likely has bear, chub, chaser, dolphin, wolf. Speaking of wild animal,
otter,
titles, otter, pups, whatever, friends in common with you. Shoot me a message though. Let me know you're not a bot. Feel free to say hi. You can also find me on Letterboxd at iBradPro. Oh, we got an LOL from our friend Scott, who was just here visiting a few weeks ago. Scott, miss you, friend.
Good to see you, Scott.
We get to see you soon for Cannonball. We're looking forward to that at the end of the month. But I think we out for the week. It was great to hang out with y'all. Take care. Goodbye.
Roll out.
Bye-bye.
Quack, quack, quack. No, geese don't make quacks. What?